Welcome to Wild in Arts Schools Outreach Programme. I'm Jenny Leonard and I'm going to show you how to get the most out of your sculpture at school.
When your sculpture is delivered, it will be wrapped in bubble wrap, so just use scissors or a Stanley knife to take that off. So your sculpture arrives. Perhaps you can unwrap him in assembly and ask the pupils what the sculpture is going to be. Is it going to tell a story? Is it going to be a famous character, perhaps a mascot for the school? What themes can we tie in? Water-based acrylic, emulsion and Posca pens can be used on the sculpture, and it's important not to use any solvent-based materials and markers such as Sharpies, as these will react with the varnish. Watercolour and oil paints cannot be used for the same reason. You can use our templates at your school to help the children design what they want on the sculpture, and we recommend when you come to paint the main sculpture to divide it up into lots of different sections so that each child can get to paint a piece. You may decide to let each pupil draw around their hand and colour it in, or simply just divide the sculpture up into a jigsaw, but we recommend getting everybody involved. When you come to paint your sculpture, it's a good idea to outline in pencil first where you want each part to go. You can also use things like coins to draw around to make little details. Now it's time for painting. You can use rollers, brushes and even fingerprints to decorate your sculpture. You may decide to make a stencil, so just do this on a thin piece of card and cut it out with a Stanley knife. Just make sure the children don't use the Stanley knives, and this way you'll get a nice shape that is equal across the sculpture for the children to use as a template. Now for 3D editions. You can add 3D elements to your model, just make sure they are secured strongly and consider carefully if they can withstand the elements of being on public display for 10 or more weeks. Make sure that the 3D elements don't present a hazard, for example any sharp edges or things that can be tripped over, and don't add 3D extras if you choose to house your sculpture outside when it is returned to you after the public display, as they will not withstand the weather and the elements. You may choose to do some collage on your model. Just use PVA glue and decoupage paper, and just be mindful that little fingers do like to pick these off sometimes. Just place a small piece of glue onto the back of your paper, spread it out quite thinly and place very carefully onto your sculpture, smoothing it all out.
Just going to stop right here to tell you something super important. Before you apply the varnish onto your sculpture, make sure you test the varnish. So test the varnish on a tiny little discreet bit of your sculpture, just so that you make sure it doesn't rub off or smudge in any way. You also want to make sure your paint is completely dry before varnishing. You allow 12 hours in between each coat of varnish and 48 hours before you start to move the sculpture and handle it. And make sure you varnish in a really dry area, because humidity can affect how the sculpture dries. When you're working on your sculpture, just dip your brush and make sure you get the excess off, and then just work from the top of your sculpture down just a little bit at a time, and use a brush that you don't mind throwing away afterwards, because it's hard to clean and it's just easy enough to throw that straight away. And once you've completed your varnish, the best practice is to just walk around the whole lot and just look out for any drips, because the varnish does tend to drop quite a bit, so just scoop up any drips that you see sort of coming down on the sculpture. So just give it a once over all around, and then you are done.
And finally, these are just a few tips of how to make the most out of your project whilst it's at your school.
So that's all from me. Good luck painting your Wild in Art sculpture.